Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Lorna Kiamba and I'm an assistant professor in environmental design and architecture at the University of Nottingham. Today I'd like to talk to you about how we can move towards energizing communities by engaging existing community structures. Let's kick things off by briefly reviewing the state of our world today. There is a lot happening in the world at the moment, but one key issue that remains is the impact of global warming and climate change. We are in the midst of a climate emergency. Now more than ever, we're moving towards an energy revolution. People realize that if we do not act on global warming now, we face the risk of increasing temperatures, extreme weather events, and devastating social effects. Against this backdrop, it's increasingly recognized that the transition to a post-carbon economy needs to be green, sustainable, and socially inclusive, with the Paris Agreement referring to imperatives of a just transition, and the EU vowing to leave no one behind in its proposed Green Deal. More recently, the COVID-19 pandemic serves as a stark reminder that social economic disruptions tend to worsen social inequalities, with pandemic policies disproportionately affecting low-skilled workers, minorities, women, and other vulnerable groups. Incidentally, the COVID-19 pandemic response has simulated an unintended and short-lived decarbonization experience. The question is, how do we maintain this trajectory? The UK government has responded in terms of looking towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions by signing the Climate Change Act in 2008. But following further deliberation, this act was amended in 2019 to constitute a legally binding commitment to actually end the UK's contribution to climate change. Change has been happening very slowly, but we have seen change. For instance, a decade ago, about 40% of the country's electricity came from coal, with just 3% coming from renewables such as wind and solar. So far this year, renewables have generated more power than all fossil fuels put together. Now, whereas a significant share of coal-powered energy has been replaced by renewable sources, the largest power source in Britain, for instance, is natural gas, which is a carbon-emitting fossil fuel, a very clear indication that there's still more work that needs to be done. Built environment professionals and researchers have a major role to play in our energy transition. This is because a significant amount of energy consumption is directly linked to energy use in buildings. I'd like to talk a bit about Nottingham, and I'll also link to a project that I've been involved in that was actually also set partially in Nottingham. What's happening in Nottingham at the moment? In 2020, a very ambitious scheme that would see Nottingham become the first carbon neutral city in the UK was formally approved. Now, if successful, it would see the city become carbon neutral by the year 2028. Now, my work and that of other researchers at the University of Nottingham has and continues to actively feed into this amazing transformation. As this is a brief presentation, I'll just pick on one example in terms of the projects I've been involved in. In Nottingham, we worked with a community based in the Meadows, and the aim of the work was to show that using electrical energy storage within a residential community could actually reduce the energy costs for consumers by, number one, increasing self-consumption, which means having them using more energy generated on site, and looking to reduce the amount of energy drawn from the national grid at peak times, which is when it tends to be more expensive. Now, the Meadows is an urban area just to the south of the city centre of Nottingham. So that's the Meadows area where you have the drop pin there, city centre being to the top. That area, the Meadows, has actually has a long history of economic deprivation and pure poverty. That said, there's also a really strong or tight community structure with a high level of community cohesion as well. As a bit of background, in around 2007, some Meadows residents got together to try and do something positive about the struggle many people had in terms of not being able to pay their rising fuel bills, and also because they were trying to be good citizens, they were trying to tackle global warming as well from their own perspective. What they wanted to do was to set up projects to produce green electricity locally, and to also reduce the amount of fuel that houses in the Meadows needed to actually keep it warm in the winter, and to have things such as hot water. This then led to the formation of a local energy structure or company, which is MOSES. What MOSES stands for is the Meadows Ozone Energy Services Company, and that was set up in 2009. Since then, MOSES has positively impacted many residents in the Meadows. For example, they've been awarded funding to carry out means-tested solar PV installation programming. They facilitated housing fabric improvements. They provided zero-interest green loans to low-income earners in their community. They've also, as with what they've done in the Sensible project, which I'll go ahead to talk about, they've contributed to several research projects and received interest in terms of visitors from around the world, in terms of seeing how a local community is actually trying to take control of their energy future. Now, more recently, Moses took part in the project Sensible. Now, Sensible stands for Storage-Enabled Sustainable Energy for Buildings and Communities. And the main objective of this project was to develop, demonstrate, and evaluate a storage-enabled supply for buildings and communities. The project brought together partners from 6 European countries, including Germany, Finland, France, Portugal, Spain, UK. And they came from many areas from within the electricity trading sector. But most importantly, we did have the electricity users themselves, and those are represented in Nottingham by the Meadows residents through Moses. The project had 3 demonstrator sites, with the Meadows community serving as the one in Nottingham, as I previously said. And the project more or less investigated the storing and sharing of localized energy generation within a community, thereby trying to sort of increase efficiency and reduce costs for all. Now, going in, this approach raised a few questions. So, for instance, one of the things we're asking was, well, batteries are expensive. How can we recoup on that investment, right? How big a battery do we need? How will it be efficient? Will it work? Does it have the capacity that is needed? The third question was, or rather, we're pondering about the fact, batteries degrade with time. How do we cope with this, right? Looking to as a community, the potential benefits of actually taking part in this specific project was that we're seeking to build community resilience. So changes in terms of energy provision from a cost and infrastructure perspective, seeking to sort of future-proof community energy infrastructure with increased community and grid efficiencies. And we're seeking to look at means to reduce fuel poverty and increase energy security for community members. And also, quite importantly, trying to look at the potential range of social and economic benefits to individuals in the community from the formation of neighborhood hubs, nodes, and even networks to build that community capital by virtue of taking part, being a Moses member and taking part in the project and being very engaged through the entire process. So I mentioned engagement, asking for the participants to be engaged. We were very specific about this going in. Project Sensible community engagement was treated as a cumulative process that aimed to not only gauge the level of support for the scheme, but also sought to prioritize local needs, strengthen the relationship with the community, and review and inform the project, right? Various aspects were involved in terms of the community engagement process, so seeking to inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and most importantly, empower the participants through Moses, through their integration or, within the process in terms of the project, fully engaging and being aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how that could potentially impact them. In terms of the community engagement process, we had various stages, but for purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the information that we got off the surveys and the focus group sessions. Those were particularly important to us because they were helping us identify the social economic benefits of integrating energy storage into those households and the community. And we had 3 use cases in Nottingham. We had an existing community household, so existing volunteer households who were already either had PV or did not have PV, but were still interested in integrating energy storage. We had community buildings as well by way of a school and a library. And we also had a new pre-metered community. So this was something that was going to be set up, which wasn't an existing community, but I'm going to focus on the existing element, which primarily revolves around the existing community house. In terms of the results that we got from the first survey, the pre-installation survey, the questionnaire was divided into 5 different sections, including seeking views on climate change and energy efficiency, views on community initiatives and energy storage, energy generation, supply and use characterization, property characterizations, and preferences regarding the Sensible project. The response rate was really good. So out of 68 participants, about 55 responded, which translated into an 81% response rate. Out of that, we were able to see that community views on climate change and energy efficiency indicated a really high level of engagement. For example, a high majority felt that that climate change was important to them personally, and that the actions of individual households can actually influence the rate of climate change. So these were people who clearly, through their integration with Moses and their experience in terms of having been within a community, an existing community structure, had already started forming and building up on the knowledge that they had in terms of climate change and energy efficiency. And it was indicated by virtue of the answers that they were giving us as part of the survey. A majority of them indicated that they were dissatisfied with the cost of energy. So they were concerned about their ability to pay their energy bills in the future. Now, whereas a majority were actually willing to make, household energy efficiency improvements, only half were actually able to afford spending more than £500 to do so. So those were interesting parallels, because we're looking at social economic benefits. We're saying, yes, people are willing to integrate energy efficiency methods within their households. Can they afford it? Is energy storage the answer? Is it slightly out of reach of the normal household in the UK at the moment? In terms of cost being a major hindrance, a lot of them were actually happy to explore community energy because they felt that in addition to taking advantage of things such as economies of scale, so for instance, the cost of an individual battery versus a community one, they felt that community energy would actually help improve local infrastructure resilience and social cohesion. Now, when asked about their motivation to join Project Sensible, the top 3 reasons given were actually to be greener, to conserve energy, and to save money. So they're not just thinking about saving money in terms of their energy bills, but they're actually willing to put themselves forward to be greener, to use less energy that they need to, especially if it's linking to fossil fuel, looking towards more energy that is actually generated locally. In terms of the post-installation survey, now we had a really good response rate for this. Everybody got back to us. And this was held after all the volunteer households actually got back, or rather got their energy storage equipment set up. We went back to them to ask them about their experience with it. We had, from this we were told 83% told us that they would recommend similar installations to other community members, primarily because they'd been able to cut down on their energy bills. I mean, one of the examples, we had one participant who said that he was able to save up to £500 over the summer, which was a really big win. Importantly, again, going back to some of the links in terms of what we wanted, we found that those who had PVs were able to improve their self-consumption as they were not able to store energy as it was being generated. And linked to this, there were marked behavioral challenges which help participants make their households more efficient. So I guess looking at Project Sensible and what we're able to pick up on it by trying to sort of, engage existing communities, trying to get them to be much more in control of the energy future. We found that by creating opportunities for dialogue, partners involved in Sensible were able to present the potential benefits of energy storage in the context of the meadows, and that this narrative positioned energy storage as a practical solution to local problems such as high fuel costs and fuel poverty, and possible contribution to wider regional and national objectives. I mean, we're talking about going carbon neutral by 2050, then somebody needs to start doing some heavy lifting. So it's very clear that this community were right on the ball in terms of really wanting to support this, and not just a benefit for them, but a benefit for the greater good. We find that now by embracing renewables, building better quality housing, upgrading existing housing stock, and putting people at the center of this transformation, we can actually drive this forward. In the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic, we face a choice between recovering the carbon-intensive global economy that has set us on the path towards environmental breakdown and accelerating the transition towards a future that prioritizes the health of people and planet. If you would like to see a bit more on the work that we've done with relation to Project Sensible, then please do refer to the publications that we see on the screen. There's quite a bit that we've written up in terms of the work that we're doing, actually currently still writing a bit. So there's quite a bit, that's been done and that's been said that might be of interest. I'm really very happy to discuss this and other opportunities further. So please do get in touch if that is the case. I'm very open, send me an email, we could have a chat, see how we can push this forward and have, look towards solutions that will actually be long-standing in terms of moving towards a post-carbon economy, post-COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much.